classmates asked me about Tiananmen Massacre. And
About
it was
what?
Tiananmen Massacre. Remember all these tankmen story, tankmen picture? I was so brainwashed. I just firmly replied like there was no massacre. I said nobody was killed.
Mm.
And because on the Chinese TV stations at that time, we were shown dead bodies of soldiers. We were told that students killed soldiers.
Oh.
And of course, the government said no student was killed. And that was how brainwashed I was in 1995. It took me 5 years to graduate away from this kind of brainwash. And by the year of 2000, I already graduated from Caltech and I accepted the job offer to work there. And then I got married, I had my 2 daughters. And my life was settled, I was peaceful. I just started to wonder, what can I do for the rest of my life to serve the community? It's just like all of you are here as Rotarians or work, for Boys and Girls Club, you want to do something to serve your community. And I asked myself the same question. And I decided, since I was so brainwashed in China, just because nobody told me there was a Tiananmen Massacre. And I'm also an information scientist. I'm very good at summarizing, extracting information, presenting them to people. And I want to apply my own personal skill to become a public speaker. I want to speak on topics about China that all this information that you cannot read from mainstream media just because they didn't care or they cannot access them because of the language barrier. And that's my topic today, about human rights in China. I'm pretty sure you all heard from news about how Christians and Tibetans and people, different religious groups in China are persecuted. But according to Amnesty International, this group called Falun Gong is the largest group persecuted. It's also known as Falun Dafa. In Chinese, Falun means universe, Gong means energy, and Dafa means principle. So this is a traditional Chinese meditation exercise based on the principle of truthfulness, compassion, tolerance. Has thousands of years of history in China that people meditate for better health. And Falun Gong is one of those schools that is most famous for its health benefits, and it's always taught for free, because according to this principle, nobody should make profit from that. And because of these 2 reasons, it's the most popular meditation around the world. More than 100 million people in more than 114 countries do this exercise. And in Southern California, we see Falun Gong in many community events. They are in our Independence Day parades, they are in the parks, in the sports festivals, in Earth Day, they teach newcomers exercise. They also brought traditional Chinese performances to our neighborhood. And in China, before the government started to persecute Falun Gong, it was also common to see hundreds and thousands of people do this meditation in almost every park in China. It's Chinese culture, like people get up early, go to park, and you meet friends there, you meditate, you do Tai Chi, you dance, you do whatever together. And in 1999, the US News and World Report published an article said China had 70 million people practicing Falun Gong. It's about like 5 to 10% of Chinese population. The article also said more people joining Falun Gong than joining the Communist Party. And when I read about this, I felt so nervous. Wow, that's not a very appropriate comparison, right? Because the Communist Party in all countries maintain their authority with violence and propaganda. And the reason they hate Christians or Tibetans, all these religions, is because once you have your own spiritual belief, even during the Cultural Revolution, they hated intellectuals, because once you're educated, you have your own independent thinking. It's very hard to brainwash you. And Falun Gong, although strictly speaking, it's just meditation. You do it at home. There's no temple, there's no registration. But still, to the Chinese government, this is independent thinking. This is a huge population of Chinese people that cannot be easily brainwashed. Soon after that article was published, Chinese government started a large-scale persecution towards Falun Gong. Millions of people were jailed, and many of them were killed just because they do this meditation. In the past 20 years, at any given time, there are about 500,000 Falun Gong detained in Chinese prisons and labor camps. According to Amnesty International, about 60 to 80% of population in Chinese labor camps were Falun Gong practitioners. So this is the largest group persecuted in China. They are not only tortured and they were used as slave laborers, they had to work That's why American workers lost their job, because all these big companies moved their production line to China, because China has many, many cheap labor or slave labor in labor camps to make cheap products. But what shocked me the most was the news about organ harvesting. In 2006, a Chinese nurse came to Los Angeles, and she held press conferences among Chinese media. And she told her personal story. She said her ex-husband was a military surgeon. She said he killed over 2,000 Falun Gong in 3 years and took corneas from them for transplant. She said this is a state-sanctioned practice. The government organized the whole thing, and there are many, many hospitals in China taking organs from Falun Gong for transplant. That was so shocking that even reporters thought they must do some research to figure out what was happening. So the first thing checked by the Chinese reporters was they checked the websites of Chinese hospitals. And immediately they found something suspicious, because in the US, it's common that people wait for 3 years or 7 years for kidney transplant, because you wait until someone died from car accident who happen to have the same blood type match as you. But in China, almost every hospital on their website said they can find donors within 1 to 4 weeks. They must have many, many donors in China, right? And you can imagine, yeah, it's a huge nation, car accidents every day. But in reality, China does not even have a valid organ donation system. Chinese people do not like to donate organs because of the cultural reason. For thousands of years, we believe in Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism. No matter what religion it is, people believe in reincarnation. That's the same concept in all the whole traditional Chinese culture. People believe that death is the end of one life cycle. We're going to come back after 20 or 30 years. We're going to meet our previous friends and family again. So people do not feel like donating organs, not even to their family members. According to Red Cross China, in the year of 2010, only 34 people in the whole nation donated their organ. But the Chinese hospitals, if you look at the numbers of surgeries they did, China operates about 60 to 100,000 transplants every year. Where do they get all these organs? As a member of Amnesty International myself, I know for decades China has been using death row prisoners' organs. They sentence people to death and they execute when the buyers show up. But still the number do not match, because China executes about 2,000 death row prisoners every year. That's already 95% of worldwide execution. But we all know 2,000 people is not comparable to 100,000 transplants each year. In the past 14 years, I have seen numerous witnesses from Chinese hospitals. I have read at least 5 different reports, of independent reports from 5 different witnesses about how their hospitals were taking organs from Falun Gong. And at the same time, there were media interviews about several hundred Falun Gong practitioners who escaped Chinese labor camps. They told their personal stories there, and they all mentioned one thing, important fact. Once they were taken into labor camp, they immediately had to go through blood type tests and organ checkups. Every 3 to 6 months, you repeat. Doctors will check their blood, check their organ. They especially check the organs function that can be removed for transplant, like heart function, kidney function, but not other body parts. And they were never told the results. At the same time, in 2006, 2 Canadians did a third-party investigation. They had a group of volunteers who can speak Mandarin. They pretended to be organ buyers. They called 15 major hospitals in China listed on this map. They asked 2 questions. Number 1, I need to get heart transplant. If I go to China, how long do I need to wait? And second question, hey, I heard there's a group called Falun Gong. They meditate. They don't smoke, they don't drink, and they're very healthy because they meditate. Do you have any donors like that? According to the phone recording, every hospital responded, you just need to come with cash, we can find donors within 1 day. In 2006, you can download a price chart from these hospitals' website about the body parts. $20,000 for a pair of cornea, all the way up to $150K for a new heart. Several hospitals openly address that, all the donors are from Falun Gong, they are male and under 40 years old. One hospital, the doctor even said, we replace it for free, we handpick to guarantee the quality. That's just unbelievable, because these are doctors, right? They are not supposed to kill. Like, why are they doing this? But the thing about my personal experience, I was just an average, ordinary high school student when the Tiananmen massacre happened. And I totally believed there was no massacre. I believed that students killed soldiers because the government propaganda. After the persecution towards Falun Gong started, the Chinese government has been demonizing this group. Basically, it's the same thing. They demonize the Tiananmen students at the Tiananmen massacre. Basically, they use a state-run media. And in China, every media is controlled by the government. They say, oh, this group of people, they kill themselves, they kill others, they eat their baby, we should get rid of them from our community, and we should make some use of their body parts. So when the police officers caught Falun Gong, when doctors killed them, they do not feel they're killing people. It's very much like during the Holocaust, just average Germans. They killed Jewish groups and they didn't feel guilty because they thought they were not human. And the same thing, the same logic is in the mindset of Chinese hospitals. In the past 14 years, there were quite a few researches done on organ harvesting in China, and quite a few human rights groups involved on this. And you can find some books on Amazon about this, and quite a few documentaries about this were made. And one of them was called Human Harvest. It was an award-winning documentary in 2015. Basically, this 1 hour-long documentary interviewed several families in Taiwan about their experience of going to China for transplant. And I was very shocked by one of these interviews, because originally I thought, oh, for one transplant, maybe they killed one person. But in reality, organ transplant not only need blood type match, but also tissue type match. And tissue type match is very complicated. Some patients have very, very strange tissue type, very unique. And at last minute, the doctor will say, oh, your tissue type would not match with the donors. You're going to have reaction. We have to look for new donors for you. So one of these patients, he went from Taiwan to China for kidney transplant for the price of $70,000. He tried a total of 8 pairs of kidneys. Of course, he tried it like in the range of several months. Only the last pair worked. But this patient died within 1 year. That means 8 people were killed, but he only lived for 1 year afterwards. Organ transplant in China has a very low survival rate because the surgeries were done in a poor quality, and the aftercare was also very bad. It's not surprising if a government can kill 8 persons, sell you the kidneys for $70,000. Why should they care how long you live afterwards? In the United States, the survival rate of organ transplant is about 90%. And people can live for at least 2 or 3 decades afterwards. But in China, these numbers are all national secret. We cannot find any statistics about that. But I did read one of the medical articles published by UCLA Hospital. In the UCLA Hospital, before 2008, they had 14 patients went to China for kidney transplants. And the surgeries were done immediately, but 9 of them died within 1 year. That was very, very bad. And I read similar articles from Egypt, about 50% of them died within 1 year. And the very low survival rate was one of the driving forces for many countries to pass laws to prevent their patients from being treated to China, do a quick surgery, and most likely die there. Israel passed law in 2008. Their insurance company would not cover any cost if patients go to China for transplant. And especially this nation, they are Holocaust survivors. So in the nation, the whole nation, they were very aware of this. Very few Israelis go to China for transplant. Spain passed a law in 2009, basically regarded as a criminal crime. If you live there, you say, oh, I went to China, I came back with a new heart. People will say, you participated in murder, you should go to jail for that. And Taiwan and Italy passed laws to punish brokers, the hospitals and the doctors who referred patients to go to China for transplant. And the United States, in 2016, passed a non-binding resolution condemning organ harvesting in China to raise public awareness. This is a non-binding resolution, although it's bipartisan and unanimously passed with a huge number of co-sponsors. But that was already 10 years after the news came out. While Spain regarded this as a criminal crime, all we did after 10 years was to condemn it. But even that was not easy, because the Chinese government has been giving pressures to our elected officials to prevent them from speaking out. For example, in 2014, a similar resolution in the Congress was circulating, condemning organ harvesting in China. It got 245 co-sponsors. That means more than 50% of the Congress co-sponsored this resolution. But the majority leader's office was pressured by the Chinese embassy not to schedule a vote. Eventually, that resolution was never voted. It just, disappeared with the end of the session. And in the United States, 10 states passed statewide resolution condemning organ harvesting in China, but unfortunately, California is not one of these states. Because California in 2017 tried to pass a resolution, but the Chinese consulate in San Francisco called Senator President, say block that resolution, and Senator Kevin De Leon blocked it. So in California, we have more work to do. But that's just surprising to see, like, we saw the Communist Party far away at the other side of the earth, but they can call our Senate President and say block a resolution in California. That's just one example of how the Chinese government infiltrate and interfere with our local business in the US. Like in the United States, the Chinese government's mouthpiece, the Chinese government's propaganda can freely distribute and broadcast here because we have freedom of expression. As a matter of fact, Washington Post has been distributing People's Daily, that's a mouthpiece of the Chinese Communist Party. They pay our mainstream media to distribute their newspaper so that our local people can receive all these pro-Communist Party's articles. But then,
Excuse me, this is so interesting. We're running out of time in a minute. If you could wrap it up, and then we have a couple minutes for questions.
sure,
Okay.
yeah. And also, China is Fine Hollywood. AMC Theater is the biggest cinema chain in the United States. It was bought by a Chinese company, and same company bought Legendary Entertainment, filmmaking company. And once this Hollywood industry belong to a Chinese mother company, they have to follow Chinese governments about what kind of film they can make and they can show. And in the universities, any professor teaching Chinese history have a dilemma. If you say something true about the Communist Party history, you will never be able to go to China to do research. And some of them even got arrested when they went to China. So they had to choose to say something pro-Communist Party or leave this research field. And Confucius Institute is a free Chinese program offered by the Chinese government for universities and high schools. But they don't teach Confucianism, they teach the Communist Party's version of Chinese history. And for example, you cannot teach anything about Tiananmen massacre there. The teachers had to sign contract, they were from China usually, they cannot practice Falun Gong. And oftentimes in local universities, like University of Maryland, Confucius Institute blocked the university from inviting Dalai Lama from coming to give a speech at the commencement. And they have the distorted history taught there saying, Americans started the Korean War because Americans wanted to invade China. That was exactly what I learned when I was a Chinese student. But you get this kind of education in places like UCLA. If you learn Chinese in UCLA, you get Confucius Institute to give you the textbook and give you the lesson. And there were quite a few hearings and statements from American professors, university professor associations, asking universities to shut down their Confucius Institute, but unfortunately many universities still operated because they want the money, free money from the Chinese government. And last year, US government stopped funding universities who host Confucius Institutes. So they have to make a decision. If they want to get US federal funding, they cannot accept the Chinese Confucius
Would this be a
Institute.
good time to ask if anyone has questions?
I am really soon.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but at the same time, China is having this human rights movement in China because Chinese people are gradually awakened from the brainwashes by the Chinese government, especially because of the internet. Like many Falun Gong practitioners in the US wrote free softwares for Chinese people to break the internet. About 30% of the population of internet users in China now regularly bypass the Great Firewall to read the news in the US. And that started the human rights movement because Chinese people are more awakened now. China started to have human rights lawyers, people started to sign petitions to support the victim groups, and they also started to file lawsuits against human rights protectors. But what impressed me the most is the trend of quitting the Communist Party. Millions of people are quitting the Communist Party by sending their statement on one of the websites on the internet. Quitting the Communist Party, get a certificate for that, And the US government actually recognized this certificate as an official document of quitting the Communist Party. And I'm quite impressed to see the number, 349 million people quit the party, and also its affiliate organization like Youth League and Young Pioneer. You know, I feel excited about this because that's exactly what we saw in Soviet Union before the Communist Party collapsed. And we see the same thing in China now. And I'm going to end my talk here, and 2 websites for your future information. Yeah. Thank you so much for the
Thank
time.
you.